Hello and welcome to the second day of the PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. This morning we have the power behind the PeopleSoft push notification framework presented by Robert Swailes from version 1. My name is Joseph Beringhouse. I'm the Senior Field Marketing Coordinator at Appian, and I'd like to thank you for your participation in the summit. Just a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on mute. The session is being recorded and will be posted to the registration landing page for free on-demand viewing within the next week. Also, the session today will be 60 minutes with a Q&A at the end, so please feel free to ask a question in the question section of your control panel. That control panel is typically seen on the right hand of your screen. If you're not seeing it, look for a little orange arrow and click that. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Robert to begin today's presentation. Robert?
Thank you. So hello and welcome to my presentation on the power behind the PeopleSoft push notification framework. I see a few familiar names and on the attendees list, which is great. And to everyone, thank you for taking some time out of your day to attend my presentation. So let's move on. So first of all, we're going to start the journey by going and taking a look at the push notification framework. Then what we'll do is we'll move on to how it works behind the scenes, just to ensure that people are familiar with the concepts that we're dealing with. And then finally, we're going to end with a live drive-through demo, looking at some interesting ways that we can use this technology. So PeopleBooks. It tells us that the push notification framework delivers updates to the user device with real-time changes that have occurred on the server layer. The framework enables the PeopleSoft system to push the data directly to the user display. We're most familiar with this functionality in the form of the little bell icon, the notification alert that sits on your fluid action bar, and that allows PeopleSoft, it pushes its alerts out to you to inform you about various things. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take a simplified look at the underlying architecture. For those that know PeopleSoft, then it'll be fairly familiar. So we have our usual culprits here. We've got our app server. Now that's responsible for publishing the events, and then it routes these to the web server. The web server is then responsible for managing the connection to the client. So what happens is the web server receives subscriptions from the browser. And when it's presented with an event that that browser has subscribed to, it routes an event to those subscribing web browsers. Similarly, we have the process scheduler, which can be set up to publish events via the app server and the web server that will inform us that our process runs and completes. So finally, we no longer have to sit there hitting the process monitor refresh button over and over again. And that's a leap in technology for us. So what we're going to go on to is so the web server that's pushing these notifications out is doing it by using WebSockets. So we're just going to go over the kind of the technologies, the concepts of WebSockets to give people again a better understanding if they're not familiar with them as to what we're actually dealing with. So WebSocket is a communication protocol, much like HTTP, which most people will be familiar with, and AJAX as well. And within an internet protocol, we have various layers. So we have a transport layer, which would be like your TCP and UDP, very low level. Then we jump up to, say, an internet layer, the IPv4 and the IPv6. But really where we want to be is at the application layer. These are the HTTPs, the IMAPs, the SSLs, the AJAX, and of course, what we're interested in, WebSockets. So what exactly is it that the WebSocket gives us? It creates a persistent connection So if we take HTTP instead of WebSockets, you have a request and a response model where the client opens a connection, it sends out a synchronous request, say a web address, and the response is sent back to the server, for example, an HTML page. And we're all familiar with that. You put your request in and you wait for the page to load. And then when that page is loaded, that is the end of the connection. The server no longer knows anything about the client. With WebSockets, it's different in that we're establishing a trusted connection between the client and the web server, and that connection persists until closed. Finally, because WebSockets are persistent, the connection is thought of as being faster because you don't have the overhead that HTTP would have, in that every time you want to send a request, you've got to set up a connection, send communication headers. So WebSockets just establishes that initially, and then the connection stays open. So that's how it kind of makes, particularly if you're doing a lot of requests, it's considerably quicker. With WebSockets, we also have the concept that it is bidirectional. So it is able to, whereas in HTTP we said, we send a request, we get a response, and then it stops. With a WebSocket, we can send a request and get a response, but then we can continue sending requests and getting responses. And in addition to that, the bidirectional, we don't even have to request information. The other party who's part of that WebSocket can decide to send us data without us even requesting it. And that's kind of where we see the use of WebSockets in the likes of messaging applications, and obviously the push notifications. We've not necessarily requested that we get an update on whether that process has run to success, but when that process has run to success, because we've subscribed to it and said we're interested in that information, we get pushed the data from the server. So WebSockets, it's not a completely new technology. Think of it more as an evolution of web application protocols, where HTTP is like the grandfather, Ajax is moving on to be the father, and WebSockets is the son. So the power behind the push notifications is a little object called PSEvent. So we're going to take a bit of a look at that. So first up, if you look in PeopleCode, PeopleBooks for the class PSEvent, you'll find quite a relatively small, unassuming entry there that doesn't really do justice to the possibilities of this object. And so what we need to know first is PSEvent is an abstraction of a WebSocket. So this means that PeopleSoft makes it really simple for us to use WebSockets. So first up, we need to configure what our event's going to be. And we can do that at PeopleTools push notification, define server events, and you can define as many as you want. Pretty much all it consists of is the name, which we can see here, some sort of description, and then we can choose here between how the data is going to be transported within that event. We can choose from two things. It can either be a PeopleSoft row set or the key value pair. I tend to choose the key value pair because key value pairs are effectively JSON. It's the fact that you say, I want employee ID, and then you say what the employee ID is. It's very simple, very straightforward, very readable data. Finally here, these are the elements. Effectively, each one of these here that is comma separated is a key value pair. So I'm saying I want a message type, a payload, a timer, a requester. Those are my different key value pairs to send the information to whoever is subscribing to it. So to instantiate the PSEvent object, it's relatively easy. It's just an object. So you can see here, 2 lines of PeopleCode, create object of PSEvent. So that instantiates us then with an event, PSEvent object. So once we've got that PSEvent object, we obviously want people who are interested in it to do something about it. And we can subscribe to that event in 2 different ways, either via PeopleCode or via JavaScript. So here, again, 2 lines that shows us how to do it within PeopleCode. So we create our own PSEvent object, and then you can see here, all we're simply saying is subscribe to that object. Using that object, subscribe to a message. Well, which PSEvent do we want to subscribe to? That's the one that we're going to subscribe to there. So that's the event's name. And then the second parameter that we have here is a callback function. So what we're saying is when we receive this particular message, we want to instantiate this piece of code here. So this is just an app class method that it would call. If we use JavaScript, then it's very similar. JavaScript has a built-in function there, which is subscribe. That again, subscribe, we give it the event that we want to subscribe to. And again, this is a callback function. Obviously, in this case, we're talking about a JavaScript callback function, which here is an example. Into there, we get past the event name. So again, we've got this and the event data of the object that's been passed to it. So we can obviously do a check on name to make sure we're dealing with the right message. And then we can simply just take the data, the event data effectively is an object that has all the types that we want. So here I'm saying, get me the value pair that is message type and bring that back into my variable. So it's relatively straightforward both ways. I tend to prefer using the JavaScript method. That the main reason I use that is because the JavaScript is less constrained in that obviously the PeopleCode, you have to subscribe at, say, a component level. So if you to move components, you would have to resubscribe to that particular event. Whereas with the JavaScript, you can obviously inject the JavaScript at whatever layer you particularly want to give you a kind of a more consistent, a more constant approach of not having to constantly be subscribing to the events that you're interested in. So we've subscribed to the message, to the event. We've obviously started the event. So now we have to actually populate our event and publish that event. So first up, as I said, there are 2 methods. So you can use the set row set rather than the set key value pair, but that's what I'm using here. And as I said, really, really straightforward. To populate into the event object, I simply just say set key value pair. I give it the key message type, and I give it the value, which here I've taken from the component buffer, and that's as simple as it is. So next we go on to, we're going to send this event. Do we want to choose a particular population? Because potentially everyone could subscribe to a message, but say you were doing a kind of a messaging app, or for instance with your notifications, you don't want everyone to know that you've just run a process and it's just gone to completion. So in that case, you can add a recipient, and by adding the recipient, you're targeting specific people, so that not only do they have to have subscribed to it, but it has to be that recipient also that's getting that message. So you can subscribe at user level, as you can see here. That's kind of what I've targeted. Or you can add recipients by role level. So you can choose a population. Say you wanted to send the message to all your finance administrators, you could do that. And if you don't add the recipients whatsoever, then you effectively get a broadcast, and the message then will go to every subscriber. So that's kind of a, that's quite a key concept here. To publish the message, much like we would do with Integration Broker, simple. We just simply publish and then the event type that we're using. So again, the same. So within PeopleSoft, there are a couple of examples where this is used, other than obviously the notification. So if you're wanting to actually have a look at how things work and maybe play around with it, these are two good places to kind of test that. So I'm just going to go into these now and hopefully just show you what exactly they do. So we've got the server-side events test page. That sits at People Tools, Utilities, Debug, and then server-side event test page. So that one's hidden a little bit more away. The broadcast message is a newer component. I think it probably came in the last release. And it's People Tools push notifications, notification window, and broadcast message. So I'm just going to jump out of my presentation now. And we're going to jump into PeopleSoft. Okay, so we'll go to the server-side events page. Now, as I said before, it's no good just having one, because there's no point in sending the message to myself. So we need 2 logins. That should pop up in a second. Here we go. Yeah. So the way this is kind of done behind the scenes is effectively we're both in the same component. There is some code that is subscribing to the event that is going to be published here. I can add event data. So we'll use the classic, what we would expect of Hello World, and then I will publish it. So we publish it here, and you can see it pops over to this person here. So we're effectively sending the message out to whoever is in this particular component. And as you probably saw, there's some code behind this component that's effectively saying don't send a message to yourself. So they could reply back and say, so you can see there that we've effectively, by using this PSEvent WebSocket, and we've effectively got a chat. It's a messenger, and that's exactly how all the kind of the messengers, how they all work, is by using the WebSocket technology to fire backwards and forwards. So, like I say, that's a good place to start to have a look. And the other one, which works slightly different, that we've got, is the broadcast message. So as I say, this is a newer component. I don't need it in that one actually. We can just do it in one because this one works slightly different. So the broadcast, whereas that's using between 2 components, this one's actually using the the notification framework as we know it. So it doesn't particularly scale well. So I'll go full page for this. So this is more what we're used to. So we've got the role name and the username. So like I said, the choice of if you're adding a recipient, I'll just add myself because there's no one else interested. And then I put my message on here. So again, I will go with the standard hello world, and we'll send that. Now what we should see here is we're not communicating across windows here. We're going to be getting a notification subscription. So pretty much the code that's behind the notifications is going to pick up our message and pop it in here. So let's see. So there we go. We've got one alert. And there we go. We get hello world there. So again, like I say, these are really just for people who are interested in doing something with PSEvent. Have a look at these components, have a play around, and get behind the kind of the code and see what you think of the concepts. So next, what we're going to do, I'll just go back to my slide. I'm going to show you some of the things that I've been trying to do with these particular concepts of PSEvent. Oh, I will just point out as well, there is another version of that's used with PSEvent, and that's inter-window communication, but I'm not really going to cover that here. That's where it allows real-time communication across pagelets, and you'll see it used in PeopleSoft in dashboards, work centers, and pivot grid pagelets, where you change effectively one field, and it creates, for instance, you change an employee ID and the chart that's in another pagelet gets triggered to refresh to the data of that particular employee ID. So what I want to show, like I said, is some of the concepts I've come up with, possible uses for this PSEvent object, because there is a lot more and a lot more power to it than just being able to kind of push out notifications to our icon. So what we're going to do is do a live drive-through. So any mistakes that happen in this are probably a result of my late night coding. Those long-term PeopleSofters will probably be aware that we don't have the luxury of Jolt Cola in the UK. So the best we can do is have a good strong cup of tea. So that's probably why there's maybe the odd coding error around there, but hopefully there won't be. So I called it the PeopleSoft broadcasting component, or for short, the PBC. So I tried to keep it quite English. So what we're going to look at here are 5 different concepts that I've got here. Broadcasting, countdown, targeted lockout, active user count, and user inquiry. So again, we're going to jump out of here and we are going to go into our system. Okay. There we go. Now for this, we're going to have a few extra windows. So we will have that one. And I will just shrink that up there. And there we go. So we're being completely fair with browsers. We've got an Edge, Firefox, and Chrome. So we're just trying to show that we're not in any way linked session-wise. These are completely different PeopleSoft sessions. So I will just log this person in. Might as well come out of there. Okay, so this component it's I've spent more time on the concept than the look of the component. So forgive me if it looks a little bit staid. But as Han Solo said, you know, it may not look like much, but it's got it where it counts. So we're kind of hoping, you know, it'll show you some of the concepts. So first up of the 5 that we were going to show you is broadcast event, and this is more in line with what we expect and kind of what notifications does. But whereas, like we were saying, the notifications tends to be sending to a specific population, this is the idea that we can send a message to anyone who's on the system at the time. So if we just pop in there, hello world, and then we broadcast that message, we should see that that message there has popped up to everyone. So we broadcast to everyone, and this here is it's just my Edge Toolbar, as I call it, where I can store all my ideas, and I just thought it's a good way to kind of put the message out by just having it there. But you could use any way. You could have it as a kind of a pop-up window, a drop-down window that just interrupts the person so that they receive the message. It was just a way, because I felt that with the notifications, sometimes it's easy to ignore the ping of the counter going up from 1 to 2. So we wanted to kind of present the message a bit more in your face, so to speak. So next up, I want to show the timer event. What we've got here is we've established that we've got this WebSocket that we can send message out. But hang on, what the PSEvent is a WebSocket. So it can take any payload. So we don't just need to use it to send messages. We could try using it to just send data and therefore do other things. So my kind of reasoning here was, imagine you've got your sysadmin and he's sent out an email at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's about the system going down at 5 o'clock. And there I am at 10 to 5. I'm entering my 100-line order, completely oblivious to the fact that the system's about to go down. And luckily, up pops a message that the system will shut down in 10 minutes, and I can save my information, and I'm not going to be saying anything rude as a result of losing those 100-line orders. So we're going to take this broadcast message I've just shown you, and we're going to add in a timer option. So I can now broadcast a message with a countdown. So here, the addition, we can change the message actually. So let's change the message to something like that. And let's choose a time that's past. There we go. 4 or 5 will do. That'll do. So there we go. We broadcast the message, and here we can see. So we've got the message, and we've got our counter here that's counting down. So we know we've got 33 minutes to shut down. So next up, number 3 that we're going to show is the log out. Okay, so what happens if a single user is in the system that you don't want? How do you get them out immediately? You can change security permissions, but until they log out or time out, they can still do things potentially. You could try and isolate their web session, which I'll be honest is probably beyond me. Or you can go for the brute force approach, bring down the web server, but that's going to throw everyone out. And that's not good if you've got, say, 1,000 users just to get rid of one person. So how about if you could simply select a user ID and then log that person out remotely? well, this is what my targeted logout does. So we're going to choose a user. So I'm going to choose Brian, who's got an unfortunate username. And then we're going to fire the message. And there we go. So Brian's just been forcibly ejected from the system and he can't get back in. Obviously, if I was doing this for real, I'd have locked his account first, but I haven't. So he can get back in for the sake of the rest of the demo. So although this example there for kind of singling out poor Brian is just using a single user, because we're using that PSEvent, there's no reason why we couldn't say we want to log out all people with a certain role, or even we can just log out everybody. So, you know, imagine that you're going to do some maintenance and you want everyone out of the system, but for whatever reason, you don't want to take down the web servers. Well, you could lock out all the user accounts and then just forcibly log out all the users without having to take those web servers down. So it's, you know, quite a useful tool. Okay, so we're now moving on to number 4. So this was one that I kind of, when I got it, I was quite happy with this. So I called it the use account. So I've been like a developer now for PeopleSoft for 20 years, and in that time I've been asked, or I've asked myself, simple question: who's in the system at this moment? And I've never been able to easily answer this question. I could go to the PS access logs and look at those, but those only show us when we've been logged in, or at best if I've actively logged out of PeopleSoft. But if I close the browser, then there's no logout stamp, so there's no idea of where I really am. So I could try probably looking at the active sessions on the web server, but not everybody's got access to the web servers. And again, I'm not that technical that I probably would know what I'm doing with web server sessions to be able to figure that out. So I just wanted to know which PeopleSoft users are in the system. And I finally, took me 20 years, but I finally got there. And this hopefully does it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a PSEvent broadcast to all the users. So everyone who's on the system will get this message. And then when they subscribe, when their event subscription kicks off, it's going to say, get me all those users to send me a reply back. So I want to get that information and I want to persist the data into the database. So I've got a record of that, much like PS Access Log does. So there are a number of different ways that this could be implemented, but in this particular case, I've chosen to reply back with a not with a PSEvent object, just because if I send out to all the users and there are 1,000 users on the system, I'm going to get 1,000 replies back to my client via the WebSocket. And that obviously just starts to overload my client. So instead, what I'm going to do is when the PSEvent fires to all the users that are in the system, it's going to trigger them to reply by sending an integration broker message. So that way it's asynchronously and it's dealt with at the server level rather than the inquiring client. So what we'll do now is send that particular message out. And in this particular case, to get the information, because it's at the database, and also in honor of Process Monitor and having to constantly press the refresh button, I've got an update action, which I press. And that brings back the replies, so who's in the system at this moment. So we can see there's 3 people, which is good, because if there are any more, I'd be a little bit worried. So there's those 3 people. Now, like I said, if we were to close down the browser, there's no idea that I've left the system. So if we were to try using access logs, it wouldn't care. It'd still show 3 potential users there. So we'll close down Brian. Again, I'm picking on Brian, but we'll close him down just by doing that. And then we'll broadcast the message again. And then we'll see who we get back. So let's see, we might not get, let's see if we, oh no, they're back. Sometimes it's slower because obviously, like I say, there's a subscription PeopleCode to fire. We can see here, we've got that. So suddenly we know there's only 2 people in the system. And so, like I say, that was quite exciting for me because it was something that I've not been able to do before. And it gives you that real, if you're a security conscious or bit of a control freak, it allows you to see exactly who is in the system at a particular time. You know, and I've, like I say, I've not been able to do that before. So it was good. I can keep an eye now on who's in my system. Finally, the last thing I want to show you is checking on a user. So we're going to check on a user. So I will bring, for the sake, just because I've been picking on him all the time, we'll bring Brian back and we'll have a look. If Firefox will load, there we go. It's taking a bit of time. Okay, so let's get him in there. And then just for the sake of this particular demo, I'm going to take him to a specific or a page anyway, so that we've rather than sat on the home page. So let's go to a page. So addresses. So what I'm going to do here is say, what if you wanted more information about a certain user? Say you're dealing with a user who has a problem, or perhaps you want to kind of implement some sort of security system that looks for suspicious activity and investigates the system. Then what we need to be able to do is check on a user, and we're going to check on Brian here. And so he's in the addresses. Let's make his page a little bit larger so we can see a bit more. So here he is. He's changing his address. It's not particularly suspicious, but for the sake of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to send a PSEvent, and the targeted user receives the event and will respond to it by sending a PSEvent back to me with information that I've requested. So we've seen various different things. We've broadcasted information out there. We've targeted a single user to do a logout. We've targeted everyone to find out who's on the system. And now, again, we're targeting a single person to retrieve information. So whereas before, where we did the count, we retrieved the information by getting people to fire an integration broker message back. Now we're using a PSEvent, so we're effectively kind of seesawing back one PSEvent to another PSEvent. So the targeted user is going to receive that, and hopefully we'll get some information back from them. So for the sake of this now, I'm just going to take this into full screen so we can we've got a bit more real estate to see what's going on. So we broadcast our message, and here you go. So we've got information back about Brian. So obviously we know his user ID anyway, but we can see this is the component he's in here. So he's in HRE address FL. We can see the database. Obviously we're only in one database, but if we were to go to other systems, you could potentially bring back which database exactly they're in. We can see exactly which page he is on. Obviously the menu there. We can see he's in fluid mode. We can see what browser he's using, Firefox, version of Firefox, and obviously operating system. We can see what device he's using, PC. We've got his IP address there, and we can actually get the field that he's currently focused on, which in this particular demo doesn't quite work because obviously I've taken the focus away from his window. But what we can actually see, and I'll show you it in a second, I'll fire another message off at myself so that you can kind of see where the focus is on my actual window. So you can see here that you've got this information that you could use. A lot of people say in their production systems don't allow, for instance, Control J. So what happens if you get a user that comes to you and says, I've got this problem, I can't enter address, and you're kind of like, okay, so where exactly are you? And I don't know. So this way you could simply just say, hang on a second, what's your username? Bang, get me the information. I know exactly which page you're on, which component you're on. I can tell which browser you're using. You're using Firefox. We only use Chrome, so that might be causing you problems. What device you're on. You're using a phone, you're using a PC. So there's lots of information we can get here. And it's not limited to this information. I'm just showing this as an example, but I'm trying to say that we can effectively get, if we code it, we can get any piece of information that is required from a user, which is really useful. So it's a little bit of a sidetrack now, but I kind of put this in to get the user's IP address, and just to show of how we can kind of build this out more. Say I was to take the IP address, and I'm kind of quite a big fan of using APIs. It's a very quick way nowadays. If you want to add interesting features to your code, just use an API, and it can do thousands of wizzy things with a few lines. So kind of a week or so, I just a couple of hours decided I'll throw a couple of APIs in there just to show what we could do. So here what we're going to do is, using the IP address, we'll geolocate someone, so effectively try and find their location. So we do that. So again, we're sending out an API, and hopefully that'll come back to us. There we go. So that's got some location information there. England, so that's good. It's got the right country. I'm going to be honest, Colindale, I haven't got any idea where that is. What's happening here is because we're using, or because I'm using a free geolocation, it's not super accurate. But if I've tried it with a pay one, and it did get the right village that I'm in. So it's quite impressive that it can do that. But this free one, unfortunately, doesn't have the same granularity and seems to be more fixated with the actual the company, so PlusNet, as to where they're based. But again, using another API, we've got that information back. So let's see where exactly Colindale is. So another simple API using the well-known Google Map API. And again, it's free. You have to have an account with them, but it's free to use. It's the only reason why I use it. So there we go. If we can see, yeah, it's Colindale's in London. So it's about 200 miles wrong because I'm way up in the north near York. So, but again, I'm just trying to show you the concept that there's so much more, like everything, with the information is only as good as what you do with it. And if we can bring back information, we can enhance that information to really give us something that we can use. So where to next? Well, what I've shown you really here are what I consider to be building blocks. these are just ideas that have kind of come out, and hopefully these can spark other ideas or potentially be assembled to kind of solve different issues. So how about I want to upgrade a certain component, so I could combine the user query but modify it to get me a list of all users that are using a certain component. So we saw we could do that with this. We could then add into that the system automatically sending out a message with a timer saying to those people that they need to be out of that component in 15 minutes. Then when the 15 minutes up, system could send another user query to check who's still in the system. And if they're not out, it could auto log them out. So we can kind of build these things into more and more interesting ideas. And so, oh yes, I will just nip back and show you the check user. So I was going to just show you, because obviously we couldn't get the focus because we were using a different window. So in here, I'm going to click this message. So that's going to become my focus. So we can see down at the bottom of my screen that that is called Edge PBC Work Send to PB. So that button hopefully will show up as my focus. But let's click on there and see. So here we go. Yep. So we can see there. So it's got the field focus. So like I say, we could just build on that and build on that to get more information, whatever is relevant to what we need. So I'll just jump back because that's the end of my demo. I'll just jump back to my slides. We'll go to the last one. So I hope everyone enjoys the presentation, and I hope that maybe this presentation sparks some ideas amongst yourselves that can grow into some amazing developments. And I'd just like to finish with a quote from Albert Einstein. He said, "Logic will get you from A to B, and imagination will take you everywhere." And I like this quote just because as a developer, I live in a world that demands logic, but sometimes it's a little imagination that makes life a little better for everyone. So would we be where we are if Apple had just built another phone or Tesla had built just another car? So get your ideas out there and incite some innovation. And that is it. So last of all, can I just say a big thank you to everyone who's joined this presentation. And it's been great to share some of my ideas with you. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Robert, I think we have just a few minutes for some Q&A if Graham wants to hop in and ask a couple.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Great, inspiring and innovative session. We've got a couple of questions. Let's see, where should we start? So with the process that was polling to see who is in the system, do the other users have to have been previously subscribed to notifications in order to get their browser to send back the response?
Yes. So people do have to be subscribed to get the response, and so that's kind of where the key piece is. When we say subscribe, it just means that a piece of code has to execute to say that they are subscribed. So it's not something that they necessarily need to actively do themselves. As we saw with the kind of the basic PeopleSoft demo where we were sending the message to each other, we hadn't actively subscribed to something. There was actually some code behind that page that had done that subscription for us. And much like in my demo, what happens is I'm doing it rather than at the component level, I'm doing it at the header level, so that no matter what page I'm in or what component I'm in, I'm subscribed into those events.
So I have another question. When you were demonstrating the publishing a message to all users, how do you set it so that all users receive that?
Okay, so to send it to all people, it's as simple as you simply don't add the recipient. And I'm not sure if it actually tells you that or not in, I think it doesn't in PeopleBooks. It says to add a recipient, and then you get the choice of, I think it's 1 or 0 as the value, and that chooses between adding a user as a recipient or a role as a recipient. But the interesting fact is, if you don't add a recipient, then it sends it out, so it truly broadcasts. And as we saw in the PeopleSoft demo broadcast component, they only give you the option to choose between sending it to a user or sending it to a role. They don't give you that broadcast, even though they've called it the broadcast component. It doesn't actually allow you to broadcast, which is, a little bit of irony there.
So here's an imaginative question. So can this technology be used to integrate other applications? So that data changes in one system and synchronously communicates with another. So maybe external to PeopleSoft.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's no reason why not. Like I alluded to a little bit earlier, within PeopleSoft, we could potentially send this message out to other environments. So we could send it across environments, and then it becomes truly more of a kind of a management tool, because in the world that we kind of now live in, where we're no longer necessarily all in the same office and able to interact and say, can I take this web server down? It allows us to push out to all the users within another environment. And again, if you've got finance and HR, then there's no reason why we can't actually sort of leapfrog those systems from one database to another. And that's certainly one area that I'm hoping to kind of put together next in this, is the ability to go across databases, be them development stack or database types. So we're talking about finance and HR. But yeah, and similarly, with regards to kind of other applications, yes, there's potential there. Obviously, how we talk to the other applications, things would get a little bit more complicated because we're using the PSEvent. Obviously, that exists within PSEvent, but there's no reason why upon the subscription of something, it can't be pushed out as I'm actually doing in one of, to get the IP address. I'll give away the trade secrets, but effectively to get the IP address when I query the user, I actually instantiate an API that gets me my true API, my true IP address for that particular client. So like I say, yeah, there's kind of ways that we can build on this. This is purely kind of like a trigger mechanism. And I kind of see it, the key piece here is it allows me to communicate with a specific user. And that's something that's been harder to do in the past because, as we've used in the demo, we can use Integration Broker to fire messages backwards and forwards. So there's no reason why we couldn't use Integration Broker to do a messaging system, but Integration Broker can't do what the WebSocket is doing and say, I want this message to go to this user. You would have to send a message and then just kind of say, yeah, ignore everybody else and only fire this code for that particular person. Whereas the WebSocket's doing all that wonderful complexity for you, which is great.
Rob, another question on a similar theme. You've demonstrated how this can push messages to a client browser. Could this be used to push message to a mobile device, Android or an Apple device? Yes.
So it'll, like I say, it'll push it to any browser. So if the person's on Android and they're using they're logged into PeopleSoft, then they would get the message. So, again, like I showed with the user inquiry that we did there, where we got back the detail, part of the reason why I brought back the information on the device was because, yes, I envisaged that might be a key driver if you were trying to help someone who'd got a problem. Things like the browser that they're using quite often are overlooked by users because they just use that browser all the time. So when you say, well, as a support person, what exactly is your problem? And they can't explain it, by being able to bring back that information, it quickly shows that they're using the wrong browser. We don't support that browser. They shouldn't be, within our company, we shouldn't be using that browser, or they're on a mobile device. So maybe it's because the page looks fine on my screen, but of course, when you're on a small device, it could potentially have changed. As we know, Fluid can have different layouts for different page sizes. So it gives us more information that perhaps is harder to extract out of the user without a series of questions, or being able to kind of remotely log onto their device, which is, again, not always possible. So yes, yeah.
And Joseph, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, just one more.
Great. Okay, so in your examples, Rob, you demonstrated communicating with a user browser. What if a user logs in once, but opens multiple tabs using new window feature, say? Right.
Okay. Yes. Yep. In that case, they would get multiple messages. So it would go to every window. That's the nature of the way that I've built it. So by implementing my message into the browser, by creating that Edge toolbar, then if I broadcast a message, then it would go to every browser, because obviously that's kind of the way I envisage it working. I don't want people having the excuse that they've not seen the message. So the fact that I know by executing the publish, I know that people have got to have the message.
There are more questions, and we're going to try and get answers to these written out and maybe sent out to everybody after the event. So thanks again,
sure,
Rob. Back to you, Joseph.
Thank you. Robert, thank you so much for your session today. I'd like to encourage everyone to learn a little bit more about version 1 by going to their website, version1.com. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but we will make sure that both Robert and Graham get those questions so they can follow up with you. And just a reminder that there is a recording of the session, and we will share it with you next week. I'd like to mention the next PeopleSoft Innovation Summit is being planned as well. We'll be sending out a survey on Friday, and we'd greatly appreciate your feedback on this week's event. We'd also encourage you to follow Apsion on LinkedIn and Twitter so you can be the first to learn about future events. And we'd highly encourage you to join the official PeopleSoft Summit Slack channel, which you can find a link in the chat function of the GoToWebinar control panel. That way you can continue the conversation and ask any questions you have. The presenters are in there as well. And next up is Change the Communication Paradigm at 10:15. So we'll see you in just a few minutes.